Thanks for joining us, everyone. Today, your hosts are Bill Conforti, our SVP of Strategy and Solutions for Association Analytics, and Greg Pollock, VP of Sales for Association Analytics. Both of them have been in the association and software industry for years. I'm not going to say the years out loud, but you're in good hands here. So today's topic, Bill is going to take it over and let us know about that.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Katrina. So today's topic is it's about data strategy, and we've done lightweight framework type things before. We've done workshops, we've done breakout groups. So today we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to try to combine some of those. We're going to show you kind of just how easy it is to get started with putting together a data strategy. We're even going to do it on today's call. So to that end, we've got a bunch of people on here. I'd like to ask for a volunteer, right? And so think about this. If you're someone who knows your association's data pretty well, you understand your business rules, maybe have some understanding of your goals and challenges as an organization, you're a subject matter expert in membership or marketing or something like that, or maybe you're on the leadership team at your association. Really just about anyone will work. And if you'd like to be considered, right, to be our guinea pig to go through a data strategy exercise, I ask you to send a note to Katrina. And so we just asked you to set your settings to everyone. So for this, you'll want to set it to a private message to Katrina. Send her a note if you're interested in doing that. Got about 20 minutes or so, maybe a little bit more to decide, but let her know, and we'll promote you to a host at the time. We'll ask you a few questions and kind of be the stand-in for everyone else, so we can do some strategizing in real time. All right. So coming up next week, or not next week, but next time, we're going to continue talking about obstacles and challenges that deal with analytics, and that's going to be our data challenges top 10. So it's going to be based on stuff that we see and what we hear every day. But we hope that you'll join us as well, and some of your challenges will make it as well. So it might end up actually being more than 10. We are planning a very special guest for that session. So tune in on the 15th of March to find out about that. Okay, so Greg, what's on our agenda for today?
Well, I'm most excited about that because you get to see my David Letterman impression for the top 10 list. So that's going to be the best part about that webinar. All right, what are we doing today? We're going to stick to our format because it works, right? We're going to do some intros and polls. We're going to start by asking you questions. We're going to give you some answers that you've given us in the past. We're going to talk about sort of how to make data strategy simple. We're going to give you a framework. We're going to walk through each step of the framework and give you some sample questions. We'll give you a template at the end of this that you can use to do your own. Hopefully, we have a fabulous participant from the audience who's willing to participate with us. We're going to actually go through a little bit of the exercise together. We'll have plenty of time for Q&A, lots of fun and smiles along the way, and hopefully we'll all learn a thing or two. Who are we at Association Analytics? If you're not familiar with us, welcome. If you are, you got to listen to me say this again. We are a software company exclusively focused on helping associations and nonprofits better love their data. That includes everything from integrating multiple source systems, from blending all the data together in a data lake and a data warehouse, visualizing the data in cool ways like this, and a whole heap of helping along the way. Things like data governance. If you haven't seen it, go check out our data governance webinar where we actually built a data governance plan. Things like data strategy we're covering today, data cleanup that might happen in our 10 challenges, we'll find out. And all those exciting things along the way.
All right. Cool. So like always, we're going to start with the poll question. And if you've joined us before, you might even be able to guess what the poll question was going to be. But here it is. We need a data strategy in order to blank, right? There's a lot of choices here. Pick the one that fits you best. And those are to understand our data and systems, to solve data management challenges, to leverage our data for better operational performance, to leverage it for better member experience, to plan our digital transformation, and then the last two, we don't need one, we already have it, or it's not a priority right now. So I'll give you a few seconds to answer that. A lot of people saying they're doing it for member experience. So that's always good. For data management. Just a few more seconds here. Okay. Okay, so yeah, so this is kind of interesting. We had about 25% said we're doing it for operational performance, right? You want to make more revenue, get some more attendees, maybe grow your membership. Most of us, 2/3 said that they're doing it for a better member experience, right? That's I'm not surprised that's the winner. I am surprised it's that big, though. I have to say, just about 10% of us said that they're doing it to solve data management challenges. I would have expected that one maybe to be a little bit bigger. We know data management challenges, data quality, integrity, all the things that come under that are big sources of pain, for a lot of us. So Greg, I'm personally, I don't know if I'd use the word shocked, but something very close to shocked that not a single person said to understand our data and systems as a good reason for a data strategy. What do you think?
I'm blown away by the lack of answers in some of these categories. We've never had it before where so many people picked one answer and so few picked a ton of answers. Like there's like 1, 2, 3, 4 of them on here that nobody specifically chose at all. And I get you could only choose one, and we didn't plan it this way. We thought all of these were reasonable options, and different people from different perspectives would pick different answers. But I'm excitedly happy that this is the answer we ended up with.
All right, awesome. Yeah, thanks everybody for your participation there. And so now what I'm going to do is share some background data, right? So we've asked similar types of questions before. When we asked, does your organization have a data strategy? Only 40% said yes, right? So that means 60% either said, no, we don't have it, or I don't know if we have it or not, which is basically the same as not having it, or, what the heck is that, right? So maybe they're fooling around a little bit, but still, point is only 40% have a strategy. But then we asked about obstacles, right? We said, well, what's the #1 obstacle to progress in your organization? And now this wasn't specific to data strategy. It was for data initiatives overall. But I mean, I think it's very interesting that, the number #1 and #2 most cited obstacle were lack of time and lack of knowledge, right? So what we see normally is that the things that are hardest to get are budget approval and executive support, right? But only 21% said lack of budget, only 9% cited lack of executive support. So that is surprising, but great news, right? If lack of time and lack of knowledge are your 2 main obstacles, we're going to solve both of those today, right? We're going to show you that this is a lightweight framework. So coming up with the data strategy doesn't have to take a lot of time, and we're going to give you the knowledge, right? We're going to tell you how to do it. We're going to give you a template so that you can get started. And so armed with your budget and your executive support, we could all be moving forward on this right away. Okay. So Greg, what do we mean when we say data strategy anyway? We should clarify that.
Yeah. So this is a good question. What is the data strategy? Why are we even doing this in the first place? Well, what is a data strategy? We turned to our friends over at Amazon, and they helped us out here. A data strategy is a long-term plan, right? It's a long-term that defines the technology, the processes, the people, and the rules required to manage an organization's information assets. And I want to highlight a couple things here. One is we're thinking about information as an asset. This is something that we have value, right? This is our money. This is our dollars. These are the things we own. And we're saying if we own these valuable things, we should have a strategy on how we're going to use them, where we're going to keep them, what people are going to interact with them, and what are the rules allowed to interact with our assets. If you imagine that your association had a bank account and anybody could withdraw money for any reason at any time, that might not be the smartest play, right? Well, here we're doing the same thing. We have this informational asset, and we want to be able to define who can access it, who can withdraw, and who can deposit, and what are the rules about pulling money in and putting money out. Can we put Bitcoins in our informational asset device? Can we put pesos in there, or do we only accept dollars? Like, what are the rules, right? This makes a lot of sense when we transform it into money. But when we think about data, we often don't think about the rules in the same way. why the heck are we doing this in the first place? So this is a really good one, right? We went back to Amazon and they said, well, why should you have a data strategy? What are the advantages? And not a surprise, there's some of them on here that you all talked about as well, right? We want to solve data management challenges, right? The integrations don't work. The data doesn't flow between systems. We want to improve our customer experience. We want to, and really want to improve our member experience is what we're thinking about here. We want to attain maturity in our model, right? We want to get to the promised land. We want to create an org-wide data culture. And I think creating a data culture is a really important part there. And as we get into our framework later, we're going to be talking a lot about culture and potentially even achieve regulatory compliance. This can be a really big one. We all remember GDPR back in the day. Everybody scrambled to have a GDPR policy. That's all about that regulation policy we wanted to have.
All right. So Greg, and actually for everyone else as well, what do you think? Which one of these strikes you as most important, right? What's the number one advantage that you'd be looking to get out of a data strategy?
Well, I think the number one advantage is two of them. I'm going to cheat today and say two are the number one advantage because I think they go hand in hand. I think it's external and internal, right? We want to improve the member experience, the customer experience. That's the external. But at the same time, in order to improve that customer experience, we have to change the culture of our organization to better use data. We can't just do what we did last year or email everybody about that upcoming webinar we have. We got to be able to use our data as an asset to better make decisions, to better target people, to create marketing campaigns. We got to better leverage the assets we own because that's going to help us improve that customer experience. And this is coming from Amazon, right? We're all members of Amazon in some way. I'm a Prime member. They use data on me on a regular basis to improve my customer experience. And it's not a surprise that they're experts at this.
All right. Anybody disagree? Yes, I think for me, those are probably the top two as well. Anyone have a different opinion? Would love to hear that. But I think, and this kind of bears out in some of the poll responses. Ours is kind of an offensive perspective, right? For our data strategy, which means that we're going to focus on things like aligning with our broader organization strategy. We're going to have reporting and metrics and business questions that are aligned towards growth, right? Towards customer analytics, towards improving our customer experience, right? And that sort of not quite in contrast, right? Because you do need to address both of these, but on the other side, right, from the defensive side, you have things like risk management, you have compliance, you have security, maybe things like, fraud detection and stuff like that. So most of the time when we talk about data strategy, we have, governance and data quality, and part of that is security and usage and all of that, but for the most part, we're talking about ways that we can serve our customers better and achieve some growth, right? Any comments on that, Greg?
Yeah, I think today we're going to focus on offense, right? We want to improve that customer experience. We want to grow our organization. We want to align to our strategic goals. But I also want to remind you that defense wins championships. And defense also sometimes wins budgets, right? Yeah. Fear is a huge motivating factor, specifically when we go to the board and ask for budget. A small investment today in a policy that mitigates risk can have a huge impact down the road. So if security and compliance comes up, right, our servers might get hacked and people's email addresses and credit cards might get taken and run away with. And if we invest a little bit now to have a better data strategy, we could mitigate that risk. A lot of times defense can open up budgets for you. So that's available to you. We're going to focus on the positive, happy side. We're going to play offense today. And we're going to talk about how we can align our strategy to what we're going to go through our framework here.
Awesome. Okay. So so let's get to the framework now. So we're going to go to the first part, which is our focus areas. Basically, there's two parts, right? There's what are we going to focus on, and then how are we going to do it? Like, what's our method going to be? So we'll talk about both of those things. But getting started with our focus areas now. These are you could bucket things out maybe in some different ways, but more or less, and we've tried it different ways. These are really 4 really good ways to sort of segment your information. This was kind of based on consulting type work that we would do called analytics, strategy, and roadmap. and it kind of morphed into just a broader data strategy with some recommendations to how you can achieve some outcomes with your data, right? So achieve some mostly growth oriented, more of that offensive perspective on the strategy. So anyway, so those are org culture, right? Is the organization culturally ready to become more data driven? If not, what steps do we have to do to address that? Strategic alignment. Let's look at our processes, our tools, and to some degree our data, and see how they support our organizational strategic goals. We're going to look at our technology and our infrastructure, right? We're going to say, how's our current tech stack serving the needs of our members and our staff, right? What tools can help with achieving those goals better and faster, right? And in particular, oftentimes it's related to business intelligence and related to analytics. And then lastly, on the data side, first and foremost, do we have the right data to achieve our goals, right? If not, how do we acquire it? Do people have access to it? Is it properly managed, et cetera, right? So lots of questions related to our data. So those are the 4 focus areas, right? There's a lot of subsets of each one, and you might bucket them a little bit differently. But if you're unsure how to do it, I would recommend starting here. So great, let's jump into these in a little bit more detail and tell us about strategic alignment.
Yeah, let's unpack these. And I wanted to start with easy, and we're going to work our way up to hard as we go through. The good news about strategic alignment is a lot of the stuff's already done for us. We just have to go find it and get it and make sure it makes sense. So what we want to be doing here is we want to be looking at goals and our success factors, right? So ask yourself, what are our KPIs? And how do we find these out? Well, we can do a couple things. One is we can ask around, right? We can look at our strategic plan. What has the board told us we're hoping to accomplish? We can look at our executive plan. What are the executives hoping to accomplish? We can just ask them. We can go to every one of our departments and we can say, what are you hoping to achieve this year? How do you plan on measuring that, right? And then we can start to go through, well, did we document that? Did anybody write those goals down somewhere? Are those goals measurable, or are they kind of feelings goals? Do we want to grow membership, or do we want to grow membership by 4%? Or do we want to grow membership by 4% by converting more student members to full-time members when their membership expires? And our plan to do that is by offering them a discount for the first year and a mentorship, right? That's a plan. That's a measurable plan that we can actually start to understand. So part of our goal here is strategic alignment is understanding our process, our tools. Does our data support our strategic goals? And if we're writing strategic goals, we have to be able to measure those. And if we're measuring them, we have to have the data to do it. So work your way down the funnel, start with sort of high level things, and then sort of zoom one step down, one step down, one step down, right? If we're going to do that, how would we measure that? If we're going to measure that, where do we get that data? If we're going to get that data, what's the business process? Who do I need to collaborate with? Who do I need to connect with to make sure I have all that at my fingertips?
Awesome, thanks. And let's move on to the next one, which is technology and infrastructure.
All right, so for technology and infrastructure, again, good news. This is sort of a go and ask. Hopefully somebody in the organization has these answers. And a lot of times we just don't have them written down. We haven't codified our answers to these things. So it's all about our applications, the software we have, the systems we have in place. It's about the integrations between those systems. It's all about our data ecosystem, right? So we want to go and ask, hey, does anybody know all the systems we're using, right? Do we know what data we're collecting in those systems? Have we audited that? Does this system meet your needs? So this is a really important one with technology and infrastructure, is not just identifying, do we have the system? Do you know we have the system? And is the system meeting your needs, right? We go over to the IT department and we say, hey, how do we send emails? And they go, oh, actually, we have 3 email tools. And then we go over to the marketing team and we say, hey, how do you guys send emails? And they're like, oh, we use this marketing tool here. It's like, well, actually, you have 3 email systems. Do you know about the other 2? And I'm like, well, we didn't know. Oh, the event team has their own email tool. Okay. Is that tool meeting their needs? Should they be sending their own emails or should they be sending yours, right? So in this process, the goal is not to just document the information that's out there. It's to sort of uncover some interesting tidbits that may not have been known. It's like kind of shake the tree and see what falls out. But at the same time, we want to see if those things are meeting our needs, right? We're paying a premium for this system. Did you know that we're paying a premium for this? Well, I wasn't here when we bought it. I didn't know it did all those things. no, we're not really using it for all that. We're just doing one small piece of functionality that system offers. Or, yeah, I know we have that system, but it's not integrated with anything else. It's sort of an island unto itself. Is that really meeting our goals? Is that meeting our long-term needs strategically? Is that something we want to continue to do, or is that something we want to change? And I think a really big part of this with the technology and infrastructure is it's like, what do you have today? And then long-term, what would you like to have, right? And today, this is what we have, and this is how things operate. And then long-term, what changes might we want to make all that stuff better? And that's a really big part of this strategy part, is we're going to ultimately make some decisions and changes, and hopefully we will align our technology down the road to our strategy.
All right, awesome. Yeah, so it's so part of it is an inventory, right? You have to have a clear understanding of what systems you have and kind of what are all the relationships between them, what integrations are existing, how does data flow between those systems. And I think that's kind of something in most organizations, you probably have that, right, at some level of maturity. But the second part is like really getting multiple perspectives on, are these tools working for us, why and why not, and documenting that and being deliberate about and using that, right, as justification for any changes that you make is a big part of this. So okay, so those two are, if we had to rank them, those are probably the two easier ones. Now we're getting into some things that are maybe a little bit more complex, and first one of those is going to be our data.
Yeah, data. So if you were with us for our data governance process, you'll probably be familiar with these sort of things. We want to understand what data we have as assets. Is that data available? How do we collect that data? If we're collecting that data, how do we report and analyze that data? Is there somebody in charge of the data? Do we feel comfortable with the quality of that data? And a big word we want to use is ownership. I'm not a fan of ownership. I like stewardship of the data, right? No one person owns the data in your association. We're all stewards of the data. The association owns it. The members own the data. We're using it on their behalf. Now, one thing Bill talked about that I think is really important with data is understanding different perspectives from different viewpoints of the data. So imagine we're interviewing, we're running through our questionnaire, and we talk to the executive director. We say, okay, you guys, you have membership data, right? And they're like, yeah, I know how many members we have. It's like, okay, great. How do you report on that? How do you get that? And the executive director goes, oh, I go to the membership director, right? And the membership director tells me how many members I have. Clearly, that's the answer. All right, so we're interviewing the membership director, and we go, do you know how many members you have? And they go, of course I know how many members we have. I get that data from our membership manager. She goes in and runs the report and tells me what the number is on a regular basis. And we finally get to the manager who's doing the job, and she goes, yeah, I kind of run it and I put it in Excel, and I don't always trust it, and sometimes it's right and sometimes it's off, and maybe this isn't the best way to do it, right? So here we're starting to understand, well, what is the actual state of the situation when we find out from the person who actually runs the report and does the process that it's not as sound as the executive director thinks it is. And if this is one of our strategic goals and we're trying to align our numbers to reach our goal, we got to make sure we have a good process to get that number out. And part of what we're doing here is we're trying to uncover what the status quo is, and we're trying to move that status quo to a better place to align with our strategic plan. So this is a really big one where it's important when you go into these interviews, even if you know the question or you think you know the question, you still got to ask, right? And you got to ask multiple people, multiple different ways. You got to really interrogate them to get the answers to those questions, because what we're looking for is the things that we didn't know, right? That's the whole reason we're doing this data strategy project. Is if everything was fine, we wouldn't have to do data strategy. But part of our goal is to uncover what isn't fine and create a plan to get those things in a better situation.
Awesome, thanks, Greg. Hey, just one quick comment. We have the word availability, right? That's like that's kind of like the first thing you think of when it comes to data sometimes, which is, yeah, we'd really like to have more rich demographics, but we don't, right? That data is not available, right? And so one of the things that we would talk about often is like the difference, right? The nuance between availability and accessibility. And so availability is just like, hey, do you have the data? Yes or no, right? And that's like more of a black and white sort of thing. Accessibility is a little bit different. Yes, if it's unavailable, it's not accessible for sure. But there are a lot of times when the data is there, but it's not really accessible, right? It's not available in a format where I can easily get to it, and more importantly, I can easily understand it and take action on it, right? So that is accessibility is one of the major reasons why, you guys know that we're obviously big fans of this, is that it's much better to present your data in visual form than in other formats, because it's easier to understand, right? It's more accessible to wider, a wider section of your staff, right? And that gets us to the last one, which is kind of like the biggest and the hairiest in a lot of ways, which is organization and culture. A big part of that is skills and knowledge, right? So we need to train our staff, and we need to develop our skills so that more data is more accessible to more people. So what's important here, Greg?
I think all of these are important. When we onboard a new team member, how do we train them? Do we ensure that everybody's up to date on our processes and training? Do we have all this documented? Are we leveraging this at critical inflection points, like the time we make a decision? Do we go back to our data and access it? Or do we just rinse and repeat what we did last year? I think of all of these, executive support is the biggest one. And the reason I think this is the biggest one is because this is where we can unlock budget and we can unlock change for our organization, right? These things we all wanted forever, we finally have a framework to sort of unlock these and get these moving forward. And I got a little pet peeve. I got a little extra grind, stand on my soapbox for a few minutes here. I don't buy that lack of executive support is a problem. I think the real challenge is we're not doing the first three things and taking that information to the executives and asking for the change, right? We're not saying, hey, look, our strategic plan tells us we have to measure membership better, and our technology to measure membership isn't working correctly. It's not giving us the information we need. And furthermore, our process to get that data to you isn't a sound process, right? We need to be able to fix these and change these. I think executive support can be one of the easier things to get if we can articulate the problem, if we can articulate how that problem is impacting our organization. Executive and board support should be one of the easier parts. But I feel like it's one of the hardest parts of this process that most people go through. Most people aren't going through this framework before they make the ask. They're just going in and making the ask, hey, we need to upgrade our AMS. Why? Well, I don't know. Seems like about time to do that, right? We need a new website. Why? Because I don't like the colors on this existing one. One of our members complained about the website, right? How does that really align with your strategic goals? How do we articulate those problems we're really having? To me, that's the easiest way to get executive support.
Yeah, so this is an interesting one, right? Because I think it revolves around, like, what do you mean when you say support, right? So we'll do a quick experiment. Is there anyone? We got we got almost we got 100 people on here, give or take. Just anyone in the chat. Would anyone say that their executives don't think that data-informed decision making is a good idea? Any executives say, nah, I don't support that at all?
No, of course not.
Right, nobody's going to say that, right? So it's like, okay, do we have executive support for our data initiative? Well, of course we do, right? I mean, do we have executive support to create a data strategy? Of course, that's they say it, but they won't support. But how do they demonstrate the actual support? Is they authorize budget to spend on it. And so if I ask you that question, how many of you would authorize budget in the current or in the upcoming budget? Probably a lot of you would say, well, it's not the best time. There's
other
have
priorities.
Right, we got to do that, change those colors on the website. We got to get that new AMS, which is, being honest, is very, very similar to the old AMS, right? We have to do those things. But the point is that if, when we ask for webinar topics, and we did a webinar on this, is how do we make the business case, right? How do we get executives to spend money on data initiatives? And it's like, well, there's a whole process for that. It's ROI driven. We have to highlight the advantages, et cetera, et cetera. And reality is they already know in the abstract that it's a good idea. And yes, they support it, but do they allocate budget for it? That's really what matters. So that's kind of what we're talking about here. So, okay. So that being said, those are the 4 focus areas: strategic alignment, data, tech and infrastructure, and org and culture. You might choose to bucket yours a little bit differently. You might have slightly different sort of subcategories in each one of those, but broadly speaking, bucket them out be deliberate about the areas that you want to cover, and ask your questions accordingly, and you'll be well on your way to creating this strategy. And we'll give you some sample questions here in a bit. So what is our approach? This is mind-blowing stuff here, right? We're going to document our current state, right? We're going to collaboratively discuss our future state, our vision, for the future. We're going to compare this to, and we're going to look at the gaps. Based on those gaps, we're going to make some recommendations, for solving the obstacles that those gaps pose, right? And then ultimately, we're going to have to prioritize that, and we're going to have to do some kind of planning, right? Some kind of implementation planning. And obviously, we're not going to be able to do every single thing, right? So it might be that you ask 15 questions. Each question can potentially have a recommendation, right, to address it, right? We have a gap related to that specific issue, and yeah, and you won't be able to do everything. So there'll be a process of prioritizing at the end. But in any case, we're going to start with our current state, which is research and discovery. So this one is pretty simple, right? So first, we're going to do the research part. We're going to take our existing documentation. We're going to look at our strategic plan, right? If you don't know where to find that, just about every association has it on their website. We read those often. Look at your org chart, right? What are the different, I don't know. I feel like I know a lot about our org, but it's been years since I've actually looked at our org chart, and we hire a lot of people all the time. So, it sounds weird to look at your own org chart, but that's really helpful in doing this. And systems and processes, right? Do you have, to go with those, systems inventories, right? Do you have diagrams of how the infrastructure fits together? What are the flows of data? Do you have the roles and responsibilities documented so that, if Greg or I win the lottery and we decide not to come to work, can somebody else fill in and do our jobs, right?
I want to jump in and give a quick commercial for documenting systems and processes.
Yep.
You might say, we don't need to document our process. There's only a couple of us, and we all know exactly how to do it. You would be surprised when you go through the exercise of documenting it, that you all do things a little bit differently. And when you hire that new person, they sort of pick up the process of the person that trained them, or that old person forgot that they were supposed to check that box when they did the process. And just the idea of documenting it and having that as a resource that you can go to specifically for things you don't do every day. I do this once a quarter. What's the process? I did a little differently this time versus last time. Just documenting those processes is going to be a huge outcome for you. And that's going to generate consistency. And that consistency is going to allow you to measure things, this year versus last year versus next year. We're going to have the same process. Doesn't matter who does it, right? Everybody's going to click the buttons in the same order, and we're going to have the same end result. Just documenting that process is a huge benefit. I'd encourage all of you to do it. And it doesn't have to take forever. It doesn't have to be big things. It could be something simple. Like, what happens when a member joins? What do we send them? What emails do they get? Who wrote those emails? How often do we update those? Right? What links do we give them? Right? All of these things are really important. Just documenting the process is huge.
So Greg, I'll put you on the spot here for a sec, since you said you're gonna soapbox for a sec. So Greg's our VP of Sales, and I'm gonna ask you to tell a quick story about how we created a sales playbook for all of the sales reps to use.
Yeah. So I'm a busy guy. I don't have time to write a whole playbook myself. And frankly, I don't do all those steps every day. So we made a sales playbook. Everybody on the team volunteered to take different aspects of the sales process and document them and write down best practices and pull together their templates. And then we all got together and talked through it. And what we learned is everybody sort of knew most of it, but not everybody knew all of it. And when we collected all of our templates and our best practices, everybody sort of had some of them, but not everybody had access to all of them. And furthermore, like, people don't do every step every day. Some people forgot, oh, I didn't remember to check that box when I do this, or I'm supposed to alert this person when that happens. Just documenting that process, it just makes it easier. And I want to use the word accountability, not in a negative sense, in a positive sense. Like, everybody feels okay because they can be accountable to the process, because no one's like, oh, I didn't know. It's like, it's right there. It's written down. It's easy to follow. Just go through the list and check it off as you do it. Like, everybody knows what is expected of them. So no one's surprised when something doesn't happen or falls through the cracks. right? We all know it's all documented, it's all right there. The biggest challenge is keeping them up to date. You are right. There's no magic wand to keep all your processes up to date. So we have data stewards for each one of those processes, right? When we make a change, the person who's the data steward for that process goes in and updates that piece of it. And that's our best way to keep it all on track. Is everything always up to date? No, right? Salesforce just rolled out some updates. All of our screenshots are old. So we've got to go through and redo all those. But the idea here is we've got a framework, we've got a process to catch changes and update them. And we've got at least something we can fall back upon. It's better to have at least a good document than no document at all.
Yep. Yeah, so that we could do a whole webinar on this, and I think we have, to a degree. But the other thing I would say is that you all know that we're in the business of selling Acumen. It's an analytics tool, dashboards and performance measurement and all of that. One thing I will say is that if your team members are using standardized KPIs, their standard performance measurement, their standard dashboards and things that people go to look at their information, it doesn't eliminate the need for that documentation, but it reduces some of the needs because it's kind of implicit in the tools that everyone is using. So the other thing I would say about that is all of that was done, by the way, in just Microsoft OneNote. So you don't have to go out and buy an expensive tool. It's something that you already have on hand that everyone uses. Okay, all right. So the small stakeholder groups, that's the actual discovery session. So we're going to do that in a second. So I'm not going to dwell on that too much. But you want to have questions based on those focus areas, and you want to assess, don't confirm, right? So that means we're talking about confirmation bias, right? Don't go in with an answer already in mind and ask the questions that leads the people or the stakeholders to that answer. You want to assess their real world experiences with those questions, right? It's, everyone knows that, but it doesn't hurt to call that out specifically. Okay, so you could actually do the future state first, but I actually like documenting the current state first, then we go to our future state, right? So this is our vision and our gap analysis. So I'm going to say that we're going to focus on our outcomes, right? So it's not about the how, it's about the what, like what do we want to achieve? We want to be collaborative, with that future state vision. So we said that a data strategy is long-term. Okay, fine, but long-term is too vague. You have to time box this. And if you say our future state is this, you want to put some timing around that and say, well, that we want that in the next 2 years or 3 years or something like that. Consult external resources. And what I mean by that is you don't know what you don't know so often. So external resources can be other associations. It can be in your community, We're saying that you can do this yourself, and you absolutely can, but external resources might be a vendor that helps you work through this process. But the point is like, especially if you're a small staff, as smart as you are about how things work in your association, you may not have that broad of experience about how it's done elsewhere. And so some best practices, some tools, some processes, whatever, might just be sort of outside of your, outside the box for you, so to speak, right? So try to expand that to the degree that you can. You want to try to be specific with the future state, right? So again, if you just say that you want to improve something, yeah, that's great. But if you say how much you want to improve it and how you hope to do that, then that's a much better and more specific plan. And then when I say limited is okay, meaning that you don't have to find a way to improve every single thing, right? You can pick out a few things that are related to specific outcomes and go with that. And we have to document it. This template that we're going to go through is a fine way to do that. We have to make recommendations. It's going to be a lot of things. You're going to need to work in phases, and you're going to need to prioritize, right? Well, how do we do that? Well, we do it based on business impact, right? So what's going to be the result or the outcome? Like how complex is it, and how much time and money and resources is going to take? What about reach, right? How many of our members is it going to affect, right? How many of our staff is it going to help, right? Which that kind of gets to business impact as well. But even things that have a small impact, if they have a wide reach, that's something that that can be really useful. What about readiness? So if we have, we have two departments, one of which is, and we're talking about data related things here primarily, one of which is really data savvy. They work with data all the time. They have some dashboards, they have some KPIs, they're ready to sort of implement some changes, whereas another one is kind of up and coming, right? They're just really learning. they're just establishing their business metrics and their KPIs, right? You're going to start with the first one, pretty much every time. And then budgeting, what we're talking about there is understand, how things get budgeted and make a priority based on, whether or not you feel like you can get budget to implement that, right? If it's however good it is, if you can't get it budgeted, then that's not going to be a recommendation that's worth spending a lot of time and effort on. And delegate, right? So we're really talking about today mostly the strategy part, like how to put together the strategy, and that can be almost anyone in the organization can help to facilitate that process. But when it comes to the planning and of course the implementation, obviously there's going to be a lot of delegation there. Okay, really quick before we apply it, there's a couple of questions that would get asked and that we thought of as we go through this. So we're going to quickly try to answer those.
And by questions, I mean, these were literally the questions I asked Bill because I didn't know. So who should run this discovery session, these meetings? Do I need to hire a consultant? Can we do this internally? Do I need to get a friend from another association? Like, who's running these sessions?
Yeah, so it's largely an administrative type of thing. So anybody that can ask good questions and document the answers well would be a good fit. The only thing I would say, and it's related to the confirmation bias item below, is, hey, look, if you work in membership, you're probably not the best person to ask the rest of the membership team questions, right? So you want to get as close as you can to someone that's impartial and that doesn't come with preconceived biases to the conversation. But could be anybody, similar to the conversation that we have about like a data governance process manager or a program manager. It's like somebody that's interested and that has the aptitude, that has some bandwidth, right? If you have any people like that. Okay.
Let's combine these next two because I want to get to our volunteer. Who do I invite? Which stakeholders am I involving? And that's going to tie into how long does this take? Because I feel like if I'm interviewing every person for an hour, this is going to take me years.
Yeah, so small groups, right? So if you have, for each department, if you have like one subject matter expert, right, who knows the business rules and who knows the data, and then one decision maker, that's probably enough, right? If you have someone that's maybe a staff level that executes things all the time, that's also a good person's perspective to get. But a decision maker, an SME, and a practitioner, I would say. If you have a couple of each, that's all right. But past that, you're kind of getting too big, right? You want to have small stakeholder groups.
All right. So do I have to do an hour-long meeting with these people? Can I just send them the questions and have them reply back with answers? Like, how am I supposed to run this?
Yeah, great question. So the best way usually is going to be to actually have sessions, right? And you have 4 or 5, stakeholder groups, 4 or 5 main departments. And then you have, say, 1 hour session with each, and you do that over the course of a couple of weeks. And it's like, and you haven't really expended much time and effort. And now you have this lightweight framework for a data strategy. Now, if that seems like a lot to you, one of the things that we've done successfully with our governance programs is a survey. It's like, hey, send the questions out, to ask them to spend 10 or 15 minutes on their own time to answer those questions, compile those, and then have a 20-minute meeting to review the results with each stakeholder group. And plus you have the advantage of having some of the things documented for you. So I think that's also a fine way. So maybe you could combine those two.
If I'm doing this seems like a lot of effort, and I'm doing this. Do I have to do this like every year? Do I have to do this twice a year? Like, can I just do this once and be done? Is this like a set it and forget it sort of policy?
Yeah, I mean if you do it at all, you're ahead of most, right? So let's do it the one time first. I don't necessarily think you have to go back and revise it just for the sake of revising it. I would say on an as needed basis, or maybe take a look at it, once a year or something like that. But most of the time, you're going to have priorities that come out of this that you're trying to implement. Those are not going to happen overnight, and so there's not a need to go back and update this on a continual basis.
All right, we talked about confirmation bias. The chat helped us out. Put it in Google Doc, use OneNote, put it on the shared drive, store it somewhere. Let's get to the fun stuff.
Okay, so we're gonna apply it, and we're gonna look at this framework template, right? So we color coded it to match the colors on our focus area. So I'm gonna drag this sheet over. I hope that we can. Greg, can we see the right spreadsheet?
We
All right.
can, and we're going to send this to everybody after today's webinar, right?
Yep. Yeah. So we're obviously not going to have time to do a full-blown data strategy, but we'll give you an idea of how this works. And so Katrina, if we could invite maybe one additional person, I think we had a couple of volunteers to join us for some discovery.
We're trying new things. We've got intro music. We've got audience participation. We're elevating our game this year.
There she is. I promoted Kristen to a panelist.
All right. Kristen, can you hear us?
Yep. Hello.
Awesome. Give us the quick introduction, like what is where do you work and what is your role?
Sure. I work for the American Academy of Physician Associates, and my role is Director of Data Analytics.
Ooh, okay. Yeah, awesome. Yeah, so you would be a great person to lead something like this. So we got the 4 focus areas here. And I kind of bolded, 1 or 2 questions in each one. So we'll just go through it quickly. So what about KPIs? Are there any like main KPIs that are interesting for your group right now?
Yes, we have a KPI dashboard that we've put together that measures 9 different KPIs across the association that's aligned with our strategic operating plan.
Okay, and what are some? We don't have to go through all 9, but what are some of those KPIs?
Sure. Some of them are advocacy related, some of them are member related, and some of them are profession related. So the way that we have it bucketed is towards those 3 groups. So what's specific to our organization, what's good for our members in general, and for the association and for like all PAs as a whole.
Okay, so it's industry KPIs for PAs.
Yes, as well as
Okay.
as well as ourselves, and yeah.
Okay. Is there, so, I mean, obviously you are, I won't say obviously, but I expect that you are quite advanced relative to the average one that's listening here. So you have this KPI dashboard, and what about the usage of that dashboard? Is that do you feel like everyone in the association is using it the way they should, or is it just like a couple of data people that really care about it and track that, or how's that going?
So the KPI dashboard has been the way for us to really bring all staff together and to start using Acumen more, because not every department maybe has interest in membership or sales. Like, it really depends on the department. But these KPIs that we established was something to really draw in all staff. It's tied to everyone's bonuses as well and things like that. So everyone has incentive to come in. We've also established a data champion team where we meet on a monthly basis, and we have at least one person from every department come, and one like data savvy person or someone who can go back and relay information back to their teams. So we do meet on a monthly basis as well to check in, see how we're tracking towards specific KPIs, and one may be more important at a certain time of year than another. But we are checking in on a regular basis for this. And this is what's really brought our team together to start using Acumen more.
Great, awesome. So is there thinking about future state, right? And obviously the exercise here is to do some kind of a gap analysis, but in terms of a wish list, right? I mean, you're obviously you're already doing a lot with this, but is there related to KPIs and performance measurement generally? Is there any future state or any goal or something along our success factor along those lines that you would point to as something to strive for over the next 12 or 24 months, for example?
Yeah, I liked what you guys were saying about, having those lower steps down, because of course these are kind of high level ones across the organization, but every department, as you mentioned, has their own, goals that they're also working towards as well. So definitely working down to the departments and getting it for again, all departments, since the certain modules that we have right now may not be applicable to everyone. So trying to get everyone's information and goals captured in one place would be our goal, or for a future state.
Good. Okay. And to get to that future state, is it more of a process solution? Is it more about at the actual documentation part, or do you feel like it's subsets of the dashboards themselves, right? So you have these dashboards that are, let's say, at this level of granularity, and maybe you need some departmental, and maybe even in some cases going down to, individuals or groups of individuals.
The gaps is definitely just data sources and missing data, right? Like we have external partners. So the gaps is getting all this data consolidated somewhere, and that's something that we are trying to work on, from external partners to website data to just other stuff that's not within our systems.
Okay.
Is it fair to say that the industry data might be the hardest to capture? Like if we're looking at advocacy, I tend to see that's one of the blind spots, right?
Yeah, that one is hard. Yeah, that one's hard to capture. Yes, that one specifically, we're looking at like different laws and legislation to get passed. And I mean, that's kind of out of our control as well, so that one's harder to say, oh, well, this was a fault of, we fell down somewhere, but there's only so many things that can get pushed through. But yes, definitely industry data is harder to find as well, and harder to get in a system. Right. So then it's either we're building out something custom in our AMS to bring in something, or, just trying to get this data captured in a system somewhere.
Okay, awesome. All right. And so, from that, you can kind of get a sense for what some of the recommendations might be. I could see, for example, a recommendation related to data collection, right? So let's inventory all the different ways that we collect data across systems and make sure that we don't have duplicates, make sure that we're getting all the data that we need. Let's look at technology solutions for bringing in third-party data, and how do we integrate that with the data that we already have. So I'm gonna skip tech and infrastructure. We got about 5 minutes left, because I think that some of the things that we talked about related to strategic alignment kind of bled into our tech and infrastructure, right? So let's talk about this. I'm going to go with this one, and this one is also related. So on 23, what data do you wish you had, and why?
What data do I wish I had? Oh my goodness. Depends on what department I'm talking to, right? Everyone
Sure.
has wishes that they had.
Sure.
My goodness, I wish that I had more like utilization data. So we know that they purchased something. We know we're trying to get, our LMS stuff to see when they've completed all of that. But just overall, like utilization data is getting it from all the different parties. Again, this is one that has a lot of third parties with it. So getting it like automated. So some of our KPIs, like we update on a quarterly basis because it is a manual process then. So getting automated data would be also a big wish as well.
Okay. When you say utilization, are you talking about like utilization of member benefits, right?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Right. Because some things are free, right? So they're not always going to be in the sales data. If they go in and if they access a certain part of the site, download certain areas. So yeah, utilization of member benefits. Yeah.
Okay, great. So we see this often. And the thing is, like, it's part of member benefits. And so therefore it's hard to track whether or not I take advantage of it or not. And so the recommendations might be something like, well, we need to figure out a way to attach a $0 transaction, right, to this process, right? Or we need to put these resources in a login controlled member only portion of the website so we can find out who is using them. Maybe we make them available through our community, right? So that we know that who's logged into the community and who's downloading those resources from, from that specific spot, because that's easier than doing it through our public site because it's maybe anonymous or something. So lots of different things that we could see as recommendations there. Now, organization and culture. I apologize, Kristen. We didn't leave nearly enough time to talk you through this. But what we were going to say is do the staff and your departments have the skills to find the information they need, right? So if you were, imagine that you're someone, say, from the membership department, is that something you would say is do most people in your org have what they need, know where to find it, and all of that?
It's definitely a learning process. Definitely our membership is a very data savvy team though. So I mean, they are definitely ahead of the curve because we're, a membership association. So we're typically going to them, right, for the reports. And now as we're centralizing everything, people are learning to go in and get that information. So, we're still in the growing phase there of getting everyone comfortable and working on those data champions to disseminate back to their teams as well and help teach each other. So yeah.
Yeah. And what about that? What about that supporting documentation that we talked about, like that idea of a playbook and process documentation and stuff like that? Is that where you would like it to be?
That would be great to have as well. We have like a user guide and we like challenge people to like go in on a monthly basis and like answer different questions to practice, like using the tool and answering different business use cases. So yeah, just continuing to work on that and just get staff comfortable as we're rolling out new information and tools.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So we need to improve our process documentation. This idea of a playbook. These people talked about shared drive. We can use OneNote and things like that. So we could see some recommendations along there. There's a lot of things around improving our data literacy, right? That we see as that we see often as well. So I'm going to go to some top recommendations as we wrap up here. I've got a couple of resources that we'll give you as well, but cross-functional teams are a great way to improve data literacy across the organization, right? We want to focus on training. We want to hire people that already are data savvy as well. Look at those job descriptions. Our strategic alignment is really all about KPIs and performance measurement. We want to develop, put those dashboards, make them public, get everyone sort of rowing in the same direction. In infrastructure, we got to audit, right? We got to audit our systems. We got to know what we have. We got to know if it's useful or not. We need that central repository for our data that's separate and apart from our source systems, right? And when it comes to data, we have to have some lightweight governance. We have to have some standards and processes. We have to look at the ways that we collect data and is it meeting our needs? Are we getting all the data we need? And again, this could be a webinar all in itself, but if we have a taxonomy for our content, that's going to help us really get meaningful data on our preferences and interests across everything that we do. So that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for the participation and for our guest star. We've got a few resources that we wanted to leave you with. This is our maturity model, referred to as the DAM, and you can get a start on your current state by taking the DAM assessment. So we would encourage you to do that. It's free, and it'll give you some actionable recommendations as you finish up there. And lastly, there's a group demo coming up. It's focused on IT, right? This is an interesting one for us. We usually focus on the business areas. This one is focused on IT. So if you are an IT person or you want to recommend someone from your org to attend this, they're quick, it's like 30 minutes or so, good use of your time. So ran over a minute. We try not to do that. So appreciate those of you that hung out with us for a few extra minutes. Anything to say by way of closing, Greg?
Yeah, two last thoughts. If you're not in IT, but you think what we talked about today was exciting, encourage your IT staff to attend this session, and we'll talk to them in their own language about how they can start doing these things. But last, I want to leave everybody, as Kristen was talking, and thanks so much for volunteering today. Some of you might have been going, oh man, she's got a dashboard with all these KPIs on it. Like she's got it, right? But then she said, well, I wish I had these other things. So analytics is not a destination, it's a journey. Don't strive for perfection, strive for progress, right? Chip away at it one step at a time, build the KPIs, do it manually, build the dashboard, automate the process, add more data, make it more complex, get more people to use it, encourage the staff to ask better questions. It's one baby step at a time that gets you to the end of the journey, right? So if you're hearing these things and you're like, this sounds like an insurmountable task, I'm never going to have all this stuff done, The answer is don't worry about it. Just get one of these things done. Chip away at it one step at a time. And in no time, before you know it, you'll be digitally analyzing data and transforming systems and all those fun things you want to be doing.
All right. Thanks again, everybody. We'll see you in a couple of weeks, and appreciate everyone's time. Hope you got something good out of today's session, and look out for the materials, right? The template and all those things that we promised. So thanks again. We'll see you soon.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.